Little Hand's Big Attitude, Chapter 3, The Christening of an Older Sibling.
How come Tails gets to walk and I have to sit in the cart?
It seems like a fair question to the Blue Hedgehog, especially since most of the toddlers in the store were able to walk.
Someone needs to make sure the groceries don't get stolen, Sonic.
What kind of person would steal from the sheriff? What kind of person here in Green Hills would steal, period?
Fine. You're in the cart because you have a hard time not touching things.
I can't not touch things.
Uh-huh. And that's how we ended up with 6 cans of chili in the conveyor belt when I only put 1 can in the basket.
We might run out if you don't stock up.
Sure, on the ice.
Sonic took the carton from his dad and then looked at Tails.
What do you think we should call him?
Who? The baby? I don't know. I can name my inventions, but I name them according to their function. A person is different.
Wrong. I'd say that your names come from your abilities, like how Sonic is fast, and Knuckles, well, uses his knuckles. But then your real name is Miles, which is a more human name. So your kind's naming principles are a little lost on me.
The grown-ups in my village never really told us where our names came from.
Sonic frowned a bit at his little brother's statement. He remembered the conversation that had occurred a few days after they defeated Dr. Eggman a second time. Even though Sonic's super form heals his wounds, Maddie had still insisted on checkups for him, Tails, and Knuckles. After all, even if his cuts and bruises were gone, he had an unfamiliar energy running through him, like a lightning bolt. Who knew what kind of effects it left behind?
I'm fine, Maddie. Really?
Sonic complained, trying to push her away, for remaining seated on the table of her office.
I'm almost done, Sonic. Just a few more minutes. I know it's agony for you to stay still this long, but please.
Tails was sitting in a chair, watching while picking some small pieces of debris out of his gloves. He'd been out for a while back at the hotel in Hawaii, and then his head had taken another hit when he and Knuckles were thrown out of the crashing robot and onto the ground. He'd recovered from that second fall much faster, but Maddie had told him after his own checkup that he still had a concussion from before. Sonic slouched in place, wincing a bit as Maddie stuck a medical instrument into his ear.
Sorry, I'll get you finished and then check Knuckles real quick, and we can all go on our ways. Whatever that is.
What do you mean? Aren't we all going back to the house?
Tails and Knuckles stood up a little straighter, looking to each other and then back to the Wachowskis. Sonic looked to his parental figures firmly.
You're not kicking Knuckles and Tails out, are you?
That's not what we meant.
I understand your decision. I caused significant damage to your home.
So did I. Tim told me not to jump on a drum Eggman brought with him, and I didn't listen. But you guys?
Hey, stop for a second. We never said that we were kicking them out, okay? Maddie just meant that if they wanted to go back home to your planet, then that was okay too. That's all.
Sonic's shoulders slumped and his frown disappeared. Knuckles looked to Tails.
Box, are you going to return to your village?
Tails was quiet, tugging on his gloves a little more, his tails curling up under the chair.
I'd like to stay here, if that's okay.
You don't have any parents back home either, huh?
No, just the grown-ups.
Sonic remembered Tails saying that everyone in his village thought his 2 tails were weird. Did that include the adults? Knuckles and Sonic had both lost their villages, but Tails had a village where nobody cared about him.
Of course you can stay, both of you can. And if that government guy has a problem with it.
Tom gently gave Sonic a nuggie.
You'll have to go through us first. Sonic?
Sonic snapped out of his thought and saw they'd moved on in the grocery store.
Huh?
I said you could get out and look for a toy for the baby. Got lost in a joy doctoring?
Sonic blew the man off, hopping out of the cart and jogging at the human space over to the toy section.
When my eyes had closed, I was settled in the woman's arms, and when I woke up again, I was alone. At least, I thought I was at first. I was laying on my back. Something soft underneath me, probably a blanket. Over me was a ceiling fan, The blades made in slow, lazy circles. It was just enough to stir the air, and singular bulb in the socket flickered slightly. Why did this tiny body need to sleep so much? It made it impossible to keep my bearings. I would go to sleep at one place and wake up in another, with no memory of how I got there. I listened closely, but it was strangely quiet. Where had the hedgehog and the humans gone? It was nice not to have to hear their constant, unrecognizable vocals in my ears, but I was suspicious as to why they had suddenly left me all alone after all that fuss. I tried to look around as well, but this body movement was still very erratic. My arms and legs moved when I didn't want them to, and when I tried to move on my own, they went limp. It was quite frustrating. But as I shifted about randomly, the ground beneath me suddenly shuddered. It wobbled and shifted, and then the face of a massive beast appeared in my vision. Its head was so big it could potentially swallow me whole. Long, thick fur hung down over me, and its breath roared in my ears. I was underneath it slightly, and it appeared to be looking away. Had it noticed me? I needed to be still and quiet to avoid detection, but this uncontrollable body would not cooperate. Its head bent down, and its cold, wet nose brushed against my fur, and as it sniffed me. What do I do? What do I? Then there was a startled sound, and I was scooped up and away from the beast. I looked up and found myself in the arms of the echidna, who was stepping back from the beast and murmuring something to it, then looked down at me and just stared at me for several seconds. What? I wanted to say. What do you want? But something else came out of my mouth instead. It had felt like a cough, but when I did cough, something from my stomach closed up and tumbled out of my mouth and onto the echidna's chest fur. He looked utterly disgusted, and I might have felt the same way. But honestly, I somehow felt much better, despite not having really noticed I was feeling bad in the first place. He held me out from him, looking down at the little chunks sticking to his fur, and followed something out of the room we were in. The woman was there within seconds, trading the echidna a towel for me. So the echidna was quite irritated. The woman was laughing, closing me out and cooing something to me. This woman had 4 mummies in her home, one of which was Sonic the Hedgehog, and one of which wasn't even able to move on their own, and who I'd just thrown off on was the other 3. She also had some sort of beast wandering the halls of her home, and yet she was smiling and laughing like it was nothing. Nothing faced this woman, did it?
Ozzy.
Knuckles knew that Manny had set the baby down to sleep on her bed and left the door open just a crack in case he cried. Knuckles chose to stand guard over the room, if only to make sure that someone was there, if his cry was too quiet for the woman to hear. He'd last the door for maybe 30 seconds to use the restroom. A baby hedgehog barely bigger than his fist sat in the middle of a queen-size bed. What were the chances he'd pull off while Knuckles was gone? He hadn't thought about Ozzy. He probably should have. He'd seen Ozzy hop on their bed randomly to sleep many times since he'd arrived. There wasn't usually a baby there. Ozzy had noticed the newcomer though, and when Knuckles saw him, he was sticking his nose down onto the baby to sniff him. The echidna moved quickly, rushing forward, scooping the baby up into his arms. He hadn't meant to yell at the dog, and he tried to mend the situation by patting Ozzy on the head before backing up.
My apologies. You're a good boy, I promise.
Once he felt that the apology had been properly dispensed, he went to check on the baby for any injuries. He didn't look hurt, but perhaps a bit frightened, staring back at him with wide eyes. And they threw up. Snuggles yelped and pulled the baby back, waved from him as the stream of white fluid came flying out of his mouth, splashing onto the echidna's chest fur.
Wonderful. Mother, the infant just vomited on me.
Maddie came running a moment later with a small towel in her hand, taking the baby and wiping off his face before handing the towel to Knuckles.
Don't worry, they just do that sometimes.
He has now fallen ill.
No, baby's just spit up and touches time. Ty, do you feel better now, sweetie?
Maddie ran a finger over the infant's quills as he just stared at her. Knuckles wiped the vomit from his chest, watching their interactions closely.
I do believe he likes you.
Yeah, I think he does too.